Hello and welcome to Genesis, the language of creation. I am Rabbi Rafi Mallet, everybody's Rebbe. Thank you for joining this broadcast. Tonight's class, which is class number 5 in the series, is sponsored by Colin Martin, whom we have in the studio in memory of his father, Wade Martin, and also generously in memory of my own father. Thank you so much, Colin, for the support. You can support the channel by becoming a channel member, like, subscribe, share, and join as a member. You can also sponsor a class or offer a donation. There are links in the video description. And other ways you can support the channel, shop at artscroll.com/Rebbe Rafi, REBBI. And thank you all for being here. We have 2 people, it says, watching on YouTube. We have 5 people aside from myself in the studio, which is a very nice number. So I'm happy those viewers are here with us in the studio versus on YouTube. But everyone on YouTube is also very welcome. Judaic Noahide on YouTube says, "Good evening, Rabbi," and everyone. We have Sawyer, Abigail, Trey, Colin, and Lisa in the studio. As always, everyone is welcome to interrupt at any time with questions or comments. And otherwise, I'll just begin the lesson. If anyone has any questions or comments before I start, go ahead now. Okay. We have the text over here. And let's see. Let's take a look. We started with Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, which we said could mean in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, or it could mean in the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth, comma. And the next verse is v'haaretz hayata tohu vavohu, and the earth was tohu vavohu, astonishingly empty, or desolate and empty, or primordial energy and primordial matter. And darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God, or the wind of God, or a powerful and Veruach Elohim, merachefet al panei hamayim, was hovering or blowing over the face of the water. And there, in 30 seconds or so, I summed up what we did in the last 4 hours of class. Not bad. Okay, and now we're ready for verse 3. And of course, feel free to interrupt at any time with a question or a comment. Let me know if something's unclear, either my video, my audio, or just something I'm saying. Verse 3 reads as follows. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vihi or. That's how it'll be read in Hebrew with the cantillation. And let's start with the first word, Vayomer. Now, for people who graduated from my Jonah class, this is going to be easy, but I'll break it down. And in fact, this concept we're going to talk about with Vayomer is something I think I spent the bulk of maybe the first class or second class, I don't remember, very early on talking about. We're about to encounter, okay? So the Vav prefix here, as usual, means and. And then we have over here this letter. The second letter is Yud. The Yud here is also a prefix. And it's a prefix. So what I'm going to say is going to confuse you right now. And then what I say after that is going to confuse you some more. And hopefully by the end, it'll make sense. So Yud, the Yud prefix is, I should use my my note page. Remember I made like a note page last time? Here, let's see if I can remember these notes from the other class. Here, let's make some notes. Okay, so the letter, let's get in Hebrew. The letter Yud. That's not a good font. Let's change, first of all, get rid of that highlight. Change the font to Times is nice. increase the size maybe. There's a nice big yud, okay? So yud, when it comes as a prefix, I'm going to highlight it actually in red. Red is my prefix color, okay? Yud, when it comes as a prefix, can mean this. Now I'm going to switch back to English and lower the font size, okay? Future tense, masculine, singular, okay? So that's like saying he will do something, or it, if it's a masculine it, will do something, okay? Singular. So one masculine subject is acting when you have the yud prefix. Okay, now I'm confusing you because we're talking about a past tense text. So I'll explain that eventually, but just bear with me. Okay, yud is future tense masculine singular. Does that make sense? Is that like clear? Any question on that? Okay, so now what comes next in the word? What comes next is a shoresh, a 3-letter Hebrew shoresh, which is this right here. You can see it cheats for you on the side. The aleph mem resh, these 3 letters, aleph mem resh, root, are verbs meaning to say. Okay. So now I'm going to ask, this is where audience participation comes in. If I take the yud prefix, which is like he will, okay, and then I add this root, aleph mem resh, which means to say, the verb to say, and I conjugate that, what would this word, if it was by itself, the word yomar, really, if it would be without this vav over here, the word would be yomar, but it's a yud prefix with aleph mem resh shoresh. What would that translate to? Audience participation.
He will say.
He will say. Yud prefix, he will. Verb to say. He will say. Okay. Great. So then we add this vav to it, the prefix vav, which means and then you get, and he will say. The problem is that everybody knows that this is not, and the narrative is not telling us what God will do. It's talking about what he did do in the past. Not that he will say, but that he did say. So how do I get from the future to the past? It's a future tense verb with a prefix meaning and. How do I understand it to be in the past? So my Jonah students might know the answer, okay? And that is the following concept. It's the concept of what's called vav haHipuch, okay? Remember that, vav haHipuch. Maybe we'll put in the notes, okay? See if we could do this here. Vav ha he, wrong vowel. He, nope. Typing in Hebrew is challenging. Vav haHipuch. In fact, this would get like an apostrophe, okay, to indicate it's like a single letter. Vav haHipuch. That means the word itself, hipuch, comes from a shoresh, hey, pei, chaf, which means to turn around or something opposite, flipped over, turned over. The vav haHipuch is what's called the reversing vav, the reversing vav. And what the reversing vav does, get rid of that. What the reversing vav does is it reverses the tense. So if I'm in future tense and I add a vav haHipuch, the reversing vav, it transforms the word into past tense. If I'm in past tense and I add the vav haHipuch, it transforms the word from past tense into future tense. So let's just take this verse as an example. So I said that yud, he will, aleph mem resh, say. But then I add the vav haHipuch, the reversing vav, and now it means he did say, or he said in the past, okay? And the vav still maintains its meaning as being and, it's still and, but it's a reversing vav. Now, your next question is, I'm anticipating, is But Rabbi, how do I know when it's a reversing vav or not a reversing vav? They look identical. Vav is a vav. And that's very true. And I'm sure you're all thinking this question right now. Does anyone know, how do I distinguish between a reversing vav or a plain vav, a regular vav?
Is it the va sound?
Okay. So in this vav, the vowel underneath is a patach, an ah sound. Okay, this vav right here. Maybe I can magnify it even more than magnified to 300%. Now, normally, like here's a vav that all the vavs we encountered before, more or less, like in verse 1, Eit hashamayim ve Eit haaretz, the heavens and the earth. The vav underneath it had what's called a shava, those two vertical dots that make an sound. Eit hashamayim ve Eit haaretz. That is a plain vav. It means and. Ve haaretz, and the earth or the land, right? Ve choshech. Ve ruach. Okay. But this vav here is va. So just to give you the counter example, maybe I'll put it in the notes here. I'll give you a counter example. Get rid of the highlight so it's not distracting. But if I want to write vi, like he will and he will without reversing it, it would be something like this.
We can't see your notes.
How about now? Yeah?
Yes,
Vi,
yes.
yeah, good. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Viyomar. I hope you guys see that. Viyomar. I'll make it big. For those of you watching on a mobile device. Okay. So if it be Viyomar, that would mean and he will say, and I have not reversed the tense. That's future tense, and he will say. But when I change the vowel underneath, there. Okay. To va, now I've just made it into the reversing vav. Now that doesn't mean that every vav with a patach under it, with an ah sound, is the reversing vav. We'll meet vavs that have the patach that are not a reversing vav. And when we do, I will hopefully explain satisfactorily why that is not a reversing vav. But certainly when it comes in front of a verb like this, it is the reversing vav. So looking back at the verse here, va yomar, that's how we get and he said. Va and reversing vav, he will becomes he did in the past. Alf mem resh, say, and he said. Clear? Good? Makes sense? Any questions?
I do have a question, if you don't mind.
Please.
Can you hear me? Okay,
I hear
so
you.
my understanding so far, and from reading other sources, is that we're not exactly working with past, present, and future tenses with biblical Hebrew as we do in English. That it's not, rather, that there are completed actions and incomplete actions. Have I got that right?
You might be getting a little too technical even for me. Complete actions, incomplete actions. I don't know what that is. I have to make a confession to you. I don't read grammar books. I
Oh,
didn't take a grammar course. So there's a lot of technical terminology in grammar that I'm not familiar with because I never studied it. The way I know the grammar of the text is through my interaction with the text that I've been doing my entire life. So like I know what means, but I'm not familiar with this concept of complete actions, incomplete actions, and how that impacts the way verbs are
I use
conjugated.
that.
I've never really heard of that, so maybe you could teach me.
So I use that in a more colloquial version. The biblical scholars and grammatical whatnotists, they use perfect and imperfect as and I'm I know what nouns are and adjectives and verbs and but I don't know all the other terms. But what I've heard them saying is that biblical Hebrew essentially has actions that are complete and actions that are not yet complete, and that all of the things that we're calling past, future, and present have to be derived as like what you're talking about with this valve flipping around. Is that making any sense?
I wish you would tell me more. I want to hear more. It's very interesting. So explain more. What impact does the incomplete or not incomplete, or the, what do you call it, the perfect or imperfect, how does that impact the verb?
Okay, so an
You'll
example that I
educate me.
know
This is a
of,
conversation. This is a conversation.
a particular example that I know of is when Moses is on the mountain, not Sinai, but I'm not sure which mountain he's on. I forget. But when he first meets God, and
He's on Mount Sinai. It's called over there the Mountain of God, or
okay,
or Chorev. Chorev, it's called.
yeah,
All the same
okay.
mountain. Yeah.
So and he asks the name that he should be known by, or God tells him the name to tell to Israel, and he says Aya Asher Aya, and which is translated into English. Generally, Jewish sources use it as a future tense, and the Greek sources and English sources will often translate it as a present tense. So
yeah, I noticed
that as an example. Is that future or is that present, and
it's
why?
future. It's future.
Okay. Well, that was.
But I don't know
that
how
they
that
were-
relates to the comments you made before that.
Well, with regard to how do you? Maybe I'll have to send you an example at a later time, and you can tell me what you think.
Okay, so stay tuned, everybody, because Trey is going to teach me about complete and incomplete verbs, and perfect and imperfect verbs, and
I'll mute
that'll
you,
help me
carry on.
understand the Torah better, I hope. Yeah, okay. Trey, thank you for that contribution. Avigal, you have something to say?
I have come across the perfect tense in some teaching about.
Like I said, I'm just not familiar with the technical terminology, so I need you to explain what is meant when people say complete, incomplete, perfect, imperfect. Well,
so in Isaiah 7, where the Christians always like to say a virgin will conceive, whereas in the Hebrew it's the perfect tense. The young woman is pregnant, which means it has already happened. So it has happened in the past, but it is a present thing at the moment because she is pregnant. So it's certainly not a future tense. It's a past and present combined, because her pregnancy has already happened, but she is still pregnant. So that's a
present
perfect
tense verb that refers to something that has occurred is called what? What is that called?
Perfect.
That's called perfect.
It might even be called past perfect.
So what are you saying? Is that like what Trey meant by like a completed verb?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I haven't heard it described as completed, but I've
present
heard
tense, but it's something that has occurred, so it's like complete, even though it's expressed in the present.
Yeah.
I came up with that complete and incomplete on my own because I am not. I didn't know the perfect and imperfect, but as I read the descriptions, that's what I came up with: is that one action is complete and one action has yet to be completed.
Okay, that's a little deep. That's a little complex. I would like to see how that applies within the text, so I could wrap my head around those concepts a little better. So you'll help me as we go along. Lisa, go ahead.
What it was, how it was explained to me when I took a Hebrew class way back, and I had jotted down that perfect points to the time something was done, completed. Imperfect tells the sequence of events. Does that make it? Does that?
I would love an example.
I don't know the text that well to give to go that, but Like what we're
I would
talking
say
about in
this from
Genesis.
what you're saying. Here's what I'm gathering, and I could be wrong. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. This, in other words, here, I'll let's look at an example in the text right in front of us. Okay, we have this. It's written in the future tense with a reversing vav to make it past. Whereas we encountered this verb, which was in the past tense, hayata, was, okay? And we had this verb, bara, which was in the past tense, was. I want to say that this would be the perfect tense. It's saying Bereshit bara, God created, and it was something that was, it's like maybe, I don't know, it could be wrong. It occurred before, and at that time it was. We're pointing to events that were. And here, Vayomer, and he said, is telling us a sequence of events kind of in a narrative, a continuing narrative. These are like completed verbs. This happened already. And this is kind of happening now as we tell the story about something in the past.
How Genesis on this part was explained to me that there wasn't, and you could tell me if I'm way off, is that something didn't happen this day and then it happened that day. That actually this, like in the first few verses of Genesis, that it was simultaneously. That it wasn't actually a daily, you know how it puts out in day 1 and day 2, that is that off?
You want to say that the
that's how
days were not sequential?
No, that the reason and the way it's explained is that and there was evening and there was morning. It wasn't like how we think of it as sequential, that it was, I keep doing this with my hand, but it was something that happened simultaneously. It
That it
wasn't
was
like
evening and morning at the same time.
I think she meant the creation of evening and morning, right?
Yes, that it didn't happen like how we comprehend it, that it all happened simultaneously.
So
That's,
I
I
still
mean, I
don't, I have to confess, I still don't comprehend what that means. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying it may take me more time to absorb that idea. That it happened at the same time, though it seems to be describing a sequence of events. But in other words, I understand what you're saying in concept. I could describe several things that happen, and just because I describe it one after the other doesn't mean they occurred one after the other. It just, in language, we need to say things sequentially, but we could be describing several things that happen at the same time. It's just that I can only describe them one at a time. And you're saying that maybe the creation is like that. And I could understand that to an extent where the text doesn't seem to specify a sequence, but where you have things like day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on, that would seem to indicate a sequence. And within each day, the fact that it says evening, morning, indicates a sequence, although you want to say that not necessarily. And I'll tell you how both you could be right on both counts, because Ramban, this is a big tangent. Ramban, Nachmanides, talks about, and you know who else talks about this more recently? Recent is, I think, in the 20th century, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler writes about this in terms of the creation. That now Ramban is very clear that there's a sequence, and the 6 days of creation are 24 hours each, and so on. So I don't want to misrepresent that he has some new age theory of creation, but he does say, I'm going to say something a little bit Kabbalistic, that each of the 6, or if you will, 7 days of creation parallels one of what's called the Sefirot, the so-called divine emanations, or these heavenly spiritual spheres that are related to different attributes of God, and it's a little bit beyond our purview here, but essentially people may be familiar with the concept. There are 10 Sefirot. There are these like 10 divine emanations. 3 of them are higher and 7 of them are lower. And he says the 7 days of the creation of the physical world parallel, including the Shabbat would parallel the final one, parallel these divine emanations, and that the first 3 are actually all included within day 1, except they're so elevated in their nature that nothing physical manifested from the first 3, only from number 4 through 10, the last 7, as it were. So based on that idea, if you think of the divine emanations as something that exists simultaneously, it could be that the whole world was emergent simultaneously on like a spiritual level, but we as created beings within a universe where time exists look back and see them as sequential, whereas like God could build all 7 days at the same time. He's outside of the matrix of time. So the same way that you have your pillbox in front of you with your I don't mean you personally, but someone like me, my age, right? We have our pillbox in front of us with Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and all 7 days are right there in front of us. And we could open all of them, at the same time. It's not a problem. We could open Friday before Wednesday if we want to. It's all in front of us. So in a certain way, like, let's say we manufactured one of these pillboxes and we put it, a little machine and press the button and boop, it pops out this 7 days of pills. Okay. But that's like maybe God and the 7 days of creation. He could create them simultaneously, but we as creatures who exist within the matrix of time have to kind of relate to them or view them as having happened sequentially, because that's the only way we can experience them. So even so, Rabbi Dessler, in an essay that seems to be an attempt to, like we're always trying to make the Bible fit with science, which I think is a mistaken paradigm to begin with. But, is trying to defend the Bible against the attacks that this is before the Big Bang, the so-called Big Bang theory, even, that the universe was like an eternal universe. It had no starting point, which the Big Bang did away with that. The Big Bang was actually a big win for Bible believers. Like, look, the world did have a creation point. It did have a beginning. Whereas prior to that, people believed for thousands of years, philosophers and so on, that the universe was kind of eternal. So Rabbi Dessler was trying to defend the Torah against that idea by saying, just because the Torah talks about 7 days doesn't mean that, there were literally 7 sequential days, but each day represents like an agenda point in what God wanted to be in the world. And so it's just sort of described as days, as like items on a checklist that God is checking off and making the world. But but in the real view of things, the world could have all come simultaneously and have the appearance of being an eternal world without a beginning. I feel, I can't say I feel, but some have expressed that they think Rabbi Dessler only wrote such a thing that bucks the literal reading so much to try to, as an apologetic for the fact that science at the time believed that the universe was eternal, and he didn't want that to be a refutation of Genesis. We don't even need that anymore, to be honest. I don't know if we would even say such a thing. But even if we go back as far as Nachmanides, it was very clear that everything is 24-hour days, really literal. He still relates the days of creation to the divine emanations. And so the metaphor I gave of the pillbox, I think one could still view the universe that way, and it would still fit with what's written in Genesis. It would fit with the Ramban's commentary, would fit with Rabbi Dessler's remarks. And maybe what you're expressing here is that even something that's expressed in the Torah as being sequential could still have been simultaneously in some way. But I think we have to reach very deep to pull out of our philosophy pockets such an idea. And it's certainly not. It's certainly not clear from the text that is the case. I think it's a big reach. So, having said all that, I'm not sure if that's what you meant. So I don't want to play dumb. Like, I have no idea how verbs could be expressed in a sequence and yet not be sequential, be simultaneous. I could philosophize about it, but I don't know that that's the clear meaning of the text, and I'm not even sure that that's the intent that was of how the text was taught to you. So, having said all that, what do you say?
Have you ever heard of Gerald Schroeder?
Gerald Schroeder. Oh,
He's a
Genesis and
physicist.
Big Bang. Heard of him? I
Yeah,
met.
have you?
Yeah.
I see. I think he explains it perfectly.
Gerald
About
Schroeder is good. I listened to his lectures. I own one or two of his books, and which I read, and I like what he has to say. But you should be aware. You should be aware.
Mhm.
He's criticized from a scholarly perspective by both science scholars and Bible scholars within the Orthodox world, meaning not secular Bible
Mhm.
scholars, but like traditional Bible scholars, traditional Jewish scholars of the Bible and the commentaries in Jewish tradition, that he's not representing the text accurately and he's not representing the commentaries accurately. And the truth is, I tend to agree with that. I tend to agree. A critical analysis of his writing, the way he uses the commentaries, is not, I would say, is at least a little bit misleading, because he definitely will cherry pick from, let's say, for example, Ramban's commentary, Nachmanides' commentary, statements that parallel present scientific belief, as though to say the Kabbalists knew it all along. But he'll conveniently leave out parts that blatantly fly in the face of modern science and astrophysics and quantum physics and these things. He just skips them as though conveniently, like they're not there. He cherry picks from the text to make it look like, the theologians had it right all along, and there's no contradiction between science and authentic traditional belief. And I think that's not correct and a misleading presentation. That's my personal opinion. I could give you examples, but that's not what this course is about. So I hear you. I like the guy. I like his book. I was very moved by his book. I think it's brilliant. But having become more scholarly over the last 27 years since I met him, as an 18-year-old, a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 18-year-old rabbinic seminary student in Jerusalem, when I first heard his presentation on this, and I was blown away, and I bought his book and I read it. I might even gotten it autographed. I don't remember. I've learned a bit more since then, and I've been exposed to a bit more criticism toward his writing, and I would say that the criticism is fair, and I have my own fair share of criticism at this point. So I don't buy what I'm saying is I don't buy what he writes hook, line, and sinker, but I do think that there is a lot of genius in what he writes also.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that fair?
Yes. I would agree. Yeah.
So, okay. Now you know how old I am.
I'd
Rabbi,
say much younger than what you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, I've got a question. I thought you were finished. Sorry.
It looks like it's you, Abigail.
Okay. Do I recall correctly in an earlier class that you were, and I may not put this quite properly, but at the moment of creation, time was created, and it was actually a kind of restriction of Hashem's timelessness. There was and that's why I think you said that's why he's hidden behind creation, because there's this restriction. So therefore, if time was actually created, that is in itself sequential. Am I asking a sensible question?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Just expanding on that discussion about whether things were done in order sequentially or whether it was all done at once and it's just expressed sequentially so we can understand it. If time was created, time actually means things are sequential. So if there's a restriction of Hashem's normal way of acting outside of time, beyond time, by creating time at the point of creation, he has created sequential events. Is that a way of thinking?
I don't know. I have to confess, I don't totally understand what you're asking. I don't.
Do you remember saying, was it, because I think it was you I was listening to, do you remember saying that there was a restriction?
Yeah, I remember saying this, that creation was a restrictive process.
Yeah, and therefore, and time was created at the moment of creation.
Right.
So therefore, time means sequence.
Time means sequence, okay.
One thing happens after the other. So rather than the idea that this all happened at once, the whole pillbox was created and it's just expressed in different days, the creation actually happened sequentially as it's written because it was done within the time that we live within.
I mean, I accept that the text reads more straightforward in that way. The straightforward reading of the text is that this happens sequentially over time because it was happening within the created universe, which is bound by time.
Yep.
As a consequence of its nature. I accept that. I'm not negating that. I'm trying to wrap my head around this idea of creation being simultaneous rather than sequential. And I'm saying I'm not too dumb to conceive of such a thing philosophically. I don't know that that's clear from the language that that's what's happening. I think that's like an interpretation. But someone wants to make the case that that's grammatically being expressed. I that hasn't been demonstrated to me yet.
Yeah, I'll go with the plain reading. I think does my head in to think of it the other way.
Is that fair?
These are exactly the kind of strange questions that I was hoping people would bring along with them. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Okay, I'm glad I'm pleasing you. You know, that's definitely good. Okay,
there's lots of stuff in the YouTube comments.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments. But I don't want to respond to comments because we barely touched the text and we're getting close to the end of the hour, and I would like to make a little more progress. So that's why I feel like I want to push forward a little bit, if that's okay. The question of verbs and perfect and imperfect, I think hasn't, again, I'll take it as my own failing. Hasn't been sufficiently explained to me yet. Maybe as examples arise, someone will correlate these examples to these concepts and I'll get it. Okay. So, fine. Now we had Vayomer, and he said, we did that. Okay. Now in Hebrew, like we had also here in verse 1, bara Elohim doesn't mean created God, but rather God created. Although even in English, I don't know if we gave this example then, even in English, you can have the verb before the subject. It's just not the usual standard modern usage, except when you read books and it says, Mommy, can I have a cup of water? Said Shandy, right? It doesn't say Shandy said. It said Shandy, said Shandy. We still maintain that in the English language of putting the verb before the subject. It's just not, there's just like, it's only in that context that you could think of that it's normally done. Or said the pieman to Simple Simon, right? The famous Simple Simon. Said the pieman to simple Simon. Said the pieman, right? Not the pieman said. Said the pieman. So we do have this in English. It's just not the modern usage. In Hebrew, it's also not the modern usage. But in the biblical usage, the verb comes before the subject frequently. Doesn't have to, but it can and often does, like here. So, and he said, and then followed by the subject of who's doing the saying, we have God. Okay. And God said, what did God say? Yehi. Okay. Now, once again, by this time, now you're equipped because I see there's a yud prefix over here, which means
future masculine.
Future masculine, which means either he will, it will, right? And then this shoresh is a hey and a yud. Now, let's visit a concept that we maybe somebody, I think, hinted to in the first class. No, in the third class, the third class, when we did V'ha'aretz hayata, and we talked about the root of hayata, which is it's over here in the Sefaria, right? Haya, to be. And we said, we see the hey and the yud over here. Where's the get out of here? Where's the second hey? Where's that second hey? So I told you then that the hey turns into a taf when you add a suffix. Okay. But someone had suggested, oh, maybe it's a Jonah letter. It's a Jonah letter. So let's talk about the Jonah letters. All right. We'll go to my notepad. Okay. Jonah letters. So Jonah in Hebrew is Yonah. Yonah. Okay, here's the Hebrew word Yonah. I spaced it out so you could see the individual letters more clearly. Yonah means a dove, okay? And it so happens that these four letters, Yud, Vav, Nun, and Hey, are all letters that when they are part of a shoresh, of a three-letter Hebrew root, and that shoresh gets conjugated, these letters can disappear from the final conjugated form if the letter is a yud, a vav, a nun, or a hey. And it's cute because it spells Yonah, which is a dove, and just as a dove flies away, we say the Yonah letter flew away. These letters fly away. When the shoresh is conjugated, one or more of these letters may disappear from the conjugated form. And that is what's happening in this case, not in this case of hayata, because it didn't disappear, it transformed into a taf, as I explained then. But it is happening here. In yehi, okay, I have the same shoresh. That hey yud is part of the same shoresh of hayata, the hey yud hey shoresh. It's just the second hey disappeared in this conjugated form. So yehi is like he will. Hey yud hey is to be. It's the verb to be, as we mentioned. Hayata, it was past tense. Yehi is it will be or he will be. Okay, so it will be, and God said it will be. Yehi, or what do you know? Or is, as Sefirot tells us over here, light. Okay, God is making a statement of yehi or, which is, it's more like a command statement. If it would just be here, if it would just be he will be or it will be, normally it would be this. This would be the word. Here. Yihya. Okay, we have the yud prefix, he will or it will, and then hey yud hey be. He will be or it will be. If I was just describing like something that will happen, yihya, it will be or he will be. But if I am if I'm expressing a command that something should be in a command form, so to speak, so then it's like it is in the verse. Or is it?
So is he commanding the light to exist? He's speaking to the light?
He's commanding that the light should exist. He's not commanding it to the light because the light doesn't exist. He's not saying hey yay or hey yay, which would be like the second person. I'm not getting into it now. The second person imperative. You be light. Yehi is it should be light, right? Let there be light. Light should be. There should be light. Here. Light should be. Yehi. Light should be. He's not commanding someone to do something directly, like you. It's a third person. Like there shall be light. Okay? As they translate, let there be light. You know, you have to work with it in the English to make a sentence that sounds acceptable to your idiomatic eardrum. Okay? It should be light. There should be light, if you will. Let there be light. All that is acceptable. Okay? Yehi or let there be light. Okay? Any questions on that? I wanna finish up the verse. It'll be kind of easy, I think. And then maybe I'll just address one issue on a more thought level. Okay? And then it's so what follows? What follows is vihi. So we have the repetition of exactly this prefix, the va yud, like we had in va yomer, and he or and it was in the past, right? Va yomer, and he or it said, and then God, the subject, and God said, and now you have and it or and he, and here's again that shorish, the hey yud, which is from the hey yud hey haya, right? To be. And so how would you translate this word? Vayehi.
Would that be a reversal vav?
Yes. So this is the reversing vav. It takes the same form of yehi that it should be in the future, and it reverses it into the past. So now rather than there shall be light or let there be light, or may there be light, it becomes
There was light?
and there was, or light. So Vayomer Elohim, and God said, Yehi or, let there be light. There should be light. Light should be, if you will, however you want. Vahi or, and there was light. And there was light. Okay. Now, what is the, whatever. Okay. Any questions before I ask a question? Or comments? So the question that everyone, I don't know, maybe not everyone, the question that's asked is, what does it mean? And God said, who was he talking to? How did saying do anything? You know, when I say nothing happens, especially if I'm talking to one of my kids. So I said, who did he say to? What does it mean? He said. Why doesn't it say like God made light? You know, he said, and there was. Any thoughts?
The way I heard Rabbi Singer explain it is that somehow within the letters themselves is what it is. Like so, or the aleph and the resh. Sorry, I can't see. But I don't know if that's what you're talking about, maybe?
Okay, that is an approach. Okay, what I'm gonna, I'll just elaborate. This is the Kabbalistic approach. This is actually, I'm not sure that I could say this is Ibn Ezra's approach, but he, you know, like I said to you once before, you know, the concept of you can reveal a hand's breadth, while covering 2,000 cubits. Okay, that's the Ibn Ezra's commentary. You know, he says a little, but he's concealing a lot. He said so. I'll tell you I'll just work in a little bit of a progression. Some say what it means God said is God thought. This is God's thoughts, and his thoughts came into reality, because if God wills it to be, then it is. He's God after all. He wants it to exist. It exists. Or maybe God's thought is reality, or however you want to philosophize that. But speech, they give other examples of where the verb to say is used in Tanakh to mean someone's thoughts. Because sometimes saying it's expressed as saying when it means thinking. And that is what it means in this context. This was God thought light into existence, because God's will is he's the creator. That's what he does. Others say that it's a euphemism for God making something in an effortless way, because he's God. So just as effortless as it is for you to speak words, that is the degree of, so to speak, effort or work that God puts into the creation. Like you speak, God makes. So his making is described as our speaking. It's an expression of effortless creation. So either God's thoughts become reality because his will is whatever he wants it to be, or it's an expression of his effortless creation, or, and Ibn Ezra insists on this, no, it's literally God's speech brings things into creation, like it says in the verse in Psalms. Now it's escaping me. The verse is, I don't know. I'm having a brain blank, but there are several verses to this effect of God's speech bringing the world into existence. It's killing me now that the words are disappearing from my brain, but it's not coming to me. Anyway, I could look in his commentary. He quotes it, and it's fine. But I don't want to go so far right now. So God's speech literally brings things into creation, and this is explained Kabbalistically that essentially the letters, the Hebrew letters, are representative of spiritual forces. And we talked a little bit about the shape of the Aleph, and we spoke a little bit about that. And every letter has a specific shape that is expressive of a certain concept. The letters represent spiritual forces. We talked about in the Talmud that the letters come before God, before creation, and each one petitions him, create the world with me, and God has a response for everyone, and eventually chooses the letter Bet. So, there is a certain degree of metaphor there, but there's also this real concept that the Hebrew letters represent spiritual forces. The Aleph represents a force. The Bet represents a force. The Gimel a force, etc. And each force has its own quality. It's similar to the periodic table of the elements. The best corollary in the physical world is the periodic table of the elements, where you have these symbols, and every symbol represents a certain molecule, and that molecule has a certain formation, has a certain combination of electrons, protons, neutrons, and because of that, it has certain qualities about it. I forgot the scientific term, but helium is different than hydrogen. It because of the way that its molecular formation is, it has different, what's the word I'm looking for? Different qualities, different features, and they act differently. They do different things, and they can interact if you create compounds, right? Fusing different molecules together to create a new molecule that's a combination of the others will produce something completely unique, in the same way that putting two letters together, like an Aleph and a Bet, makes the word Av, which means father, right? And an Aleph and a Mem will make the word Aim, which means mother, and so on and so forth. That the combination of, but that's in language, right? But the idea is that if you would take the spiritual force that is represented in the letter Aleph and the spiritual force that's represented in the letter Bet, and you would interact those two forces together, like a scientist in a chemistry lab, but rather than chemicals using spiritual forces, what those two would join to create would be a father, whatever that is. Okay. That's what those things make. So I'll give you an example. You have hydrogen. You take two hydrogen molecules, you fuse it with an oxygen molecule. And from being two gases, hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, when they come together, they make water. Two totally different elements, but in combination, they produce something totally new. The same way that if you take two letters, mem and a mem, and you bond them together with a chemical bond by putting a yud in the middle, so I have mem, yud, mem, boom. When I put those together, it produces water. When I take two hydrogens and an oxygen, boom, produces water. Two mems and a yud, boom, water. But in other words, so from the spiritual forces that are represented by the letters, God is speaking, that is, he's combining forces like a scientist in a laboratory, so to speak, combining chemicals to form compounds. The words are the compounds. So like you would combine two hydrogens and an oxygen and create a compound called water, God creates with the letters everything. So he takes an aleph and he takes a vav and he takes a resh and he combines them together. He speaks or into existence. Speaks meaning combining the spiritual forces represented in the letters. We do that in our mouths by creating words, and the words carry the idea of what we're trying to express from our brain to your brain, the one who hears it. These words are carrying a certain kind of thought substance, right? We're creating ideas that are expressed and then land in the person's brain, and now he can see what we're trying to express. So when God does that with the spiritual forces, he actually creates the world, so that everything in the world that's described with a Hebrew word in the Torah is actually the physical expression of the spiritual chemicals, as it were, that form those compounds in the creation, if that makes any sense. And that's the Kabbalistic idea of God speaking the world into existence. He combined forces that are represented by letters together to actually create reality. Okay, that's all the time we have. And I'm gonna sign off. That's verse 3. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We all knew that verse in English. Now I showed you how to get that out of the Hebrew. So I hope we have all the building blocks in place. We're building slowly, but you'll see as we go, these skills are going to be applied again and again, and we'll be able to put together more and more meaning from these Hebrew verses, all on our own. I'm giving you some training wheels right now, but eventually you'll be riding on your own. All right. I see there's a lot of comments. I apologize to the commenters. Time is limited, and I've been giving priority to trying to respond in the studio and just get through the material, at least a whole verse, a short verse, lucky for us. But that's been the hour, so you'll all be accepting of my exit at this time, I hope.
Thanks, Rabbi. Good night, everyone.
Okay,
Thank you.
welcome.
Bye.
Thanks for the stimulating conversation, the philosophy, and everything else. Grammar.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Thank you
Rabbi.
for everyone.
Again,
Again.
this week's class sponsored by Colin Martin in memory of Wade Martin and my father, Yisrael Tuvi Ben Eliezer. And next Sunday, God willing, will be the Ovadia class. And next week, Tuesday, we'll continue with the Bereshit class. Carol, people who wanted to ask me something that didn't have a chance in this hour to interact, email me, rabbi@rabbirafimallet.com, and let's connect that way. I'll probably ask you to message me on WhatsApp. Okay, it's the best way for me. I hear thunder and lightning. Oh, amazing. Goes with this background a little bit.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.